everyone, Teresa here. Welcome back to Lost My Thread. Today will be a bit of a different video. I'm doing a Q&A and I'm going to announce the winner of my 1,000 subscriber giveaway. So about a week ago, I posted a video asking for some questions for a Q&A to celebrate hitting 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. And I also mentioned a giveaway that I wanted to do. So I wanted to bake a batch of cookies for one of you guys out there in the YouTube world who are watching my videos. And all you had to do to enter the giveaway was to tell me a little bit of something about yourself. I have to say I am really glad that that was what I asked everyone to do, because it just made it a lot more fun to learn about the people that I'm talking to. I feel like I'm talking to real people, and I always really do appreciate getting those little interactions and finding out a bit more about who's watching my videos. So the people who have entered and told me a bit about something about themselves, I've gotten a little list on my phone. I can try and show you, hopefully it won't be too horrible to look at. You should be able to see all the people who entered the giveaway. And then what I can do is go out and I'm gonna shuffle everyone up. And then I am going to just pick one. Boop. There we go. So the winner is Pipskiloo. I'm probably not saying that right. Pipskiloo, I believe so, and I have chatted to you over on Instagram, so I know your name is Pippa. So congratulations to Pipskiloo. It's really fun that I get to share a little bit of something with one of you out there. So Pippa, if you are watching this video, and I do hope that you are, please send me an email, and I'll put the email address up here on the screen so that you can see what it is, so that way we can have a chat about any dietary requirements, and then also I can get your address and things to send your prize out to you. So yay, that was a little bit of fun. All right, so I do want to get on to the Q&A questions. Thank you everyone who sent a question through. When I asked people to do it, I honestly didn't know if I was going to get any replies, and I thought it could be a little bit of a kind of downer disappointment if I didn't have anything to share with you. But I actually got quite a lot of questions, and I think honestly I'm probably going to have to break this into a couple of videos so it's not really epically long. So at some point I'm probably going to cut myself off and say I'll come back another time, and I will post a little part 2 of the Q&A very soon anyway. But I might as well get on with it. I've got a little notebook here where I've got the questions and the names of the people who have asked the questions, so that way I can mention everyone who asked. And yeah, let's get on with it. All right, so first question that I'm going to share, there's a couple that were quite similar, I would say. So I'm going to start with one that was actually from my mother-in-law. No favoritism, I just feel like it makes sense to be the first question. And she asked, how old were you when you made your first garment? So I would say I messed around with my mom's sewing machine when I was younger, but I didn't really make a whole garment. It was more just alterations, adding like panels into the sides of my jeans or my trousers to make them a bit more flared at the bottom. It was the 90s, so that was definitely the thing at the time. But when I made my actual first garment would be when I was 16. So I took a sewing 101 class. So it was just intro to sewing when I was in high school, when I was 16, 17. So I think it ran over the whole year, and it just gave me the basics of how to sew. And that was when I first made my full proper garment, I would say, from a sewing pattern. And then Sarah Middle also asked, what was the first garment that you ever made that you wore and were proud of? So I feel like I could probably answer this question in a couple of ways, and I feel like the first thing I would say is that the first garment that I made, I wore it and I was really proud of it, but it was a mess. It was a disaster because, you know, I was learning, I was a beginner, and in my sewing class, the first project that we had, the first thing we had to do was to make something for your bottom half. So we had to make either a skirt or shorts or pants, trousers, that kind of thing. And I decided that I was going to make pajama pants. I felt like that was a pretty good, relatively easy, elastic waist, seemed like that wouldn't be too challenging. It seemed pretty basic, and I got, you know, a very simple pattern, really basic, easy sew pattern. I was also at that time not liking to wear clothes up around my waist. I mean, I've been like that for a while, since before it was fashionable, I will say. I tended to buy a lot of clothes bigger than my size so they could sit a little bit lower down, but then it went to something like pants or whatever, then the crotch would be really low. So I thought, well, if I'm making my own, I can make it just how I want it. So I can basically create low-rise pajama pants, which is what I wanted. Something happened in the process of me adjusting those pattern pieces, and I really don't know quite what went on there, but my brain reversed what I needed to do, and I ended up lowering the crotch, or raising the waistline rather, so that it was actually a very high-rise pajama pants that I made in the end. But I was conscious that I wanted to make sure that they fit lengthwise as well as widthwise, so I actually measured from where I wanted them to sit to where I wanted them to end at my ankle, and that was the length of the trousers. So we had to, at the end of that kind of first little project that we had, go back into a little changing room, put on the garments that we've made, and come out and show them to the class. And when I came out initially, I think it wasn't really obvious that these were wrong, because from just like quick glance, they were where I wanted them to sit at the waist. They finished where I wanted them to sit at my ankle. And so I kind of strolled out to the front of the class, and then I kind of spread my legs so that everybody could see that the crotch of those pants were basically like at my knees. They were ridiculous. Kind of a hammer pants, but a lot less cool. Definitely made of like pajama, you know, cotton flannel fabric. I think they had clouds on them. Not really the look that I was going for. And then just for my own amusement as well, I tried pulling them up so that the crotch was at my crotch, which of course made them like super cropped, and the waistband going up like over my boobs. So definitely huge disaster. I was cracking up. Everyone in the class was cracking up. I very much was amused by the whole process, and honestly though, even though they were a total mess, I totally wore them. Like, they were pajama pants, they were to wear at home. I was so proud that I had made pajamas. I really didn't care that it was, you know, not very impressive pajamas. But as funny as that one was, I don't think that's probably what Sarah meant. I think she probably meant something about, you know, what have I made that I was really proud of the construction, that I felt like I'd done a really good job on. And I think for me, the obvious one was my prom dress. So I made my own prom dress when I was, I guess I probably would have been 17 when I started it, for when I was 18 at the prom. And I decided to go for really what was more of a costume. I've actually managed to find pictures of this pattern. I don't know why I don't have it anymore. I was really disappointed. I went through my pattern stash and I don't have this pattern anymore. Not like I was gonna make it, but it's just, you know, a little memento. But I have found pictures, and so I'll put up pictures of what this pattern looks like. But I can show you the project, or the garment right now. It's probably not gonna show up great on camera. It's basically a medieval style dress. Has these crazy long sleeves all the way to the ground. It's got this really beautiful lilac colored floaty dress part with this bodice on the top. This bodice, I don't know how I thought this was a reasonable thing to make when I had been sewing for under a year, but I did, and I did make it. The dress itself, I will say, like the main body of the dress, not the bodice, it was a pretty straightforward make. It has a little tie to kind of cinch up the neckline here, but the hems, so there's like this little skinny hem along the whole of the sleeves, along the bottom of the dress. I must have spent forever doing this hem. I do not remember going crazy trying to make this hem, honestly, but I'm really impressed with the quality of the hem that I've done on that, honestly. It is really neat, considering I made this with very little experience. I think that's pretty amazing. This is a polyester satin fabric. It's got a nice little sheen to it. The colors, I think, on here showing up a little slightly bluer than it is in real life, but I will put up a picture and make sure that that looks accurate to what the color actually is. But yeah, I have a picture of me in that prom dress at the time when I was 18, so I'll make sure to pop that up so that you can see it on me, displaying the sleeves, of course, because that was the most exciting part about it. But the bodice part of it that I was wearing over the top of that was really complicated. Again, I don't know how I thought that this was a good beginner-friendly pattern. I mean, I think at that time, I didn't really have the concept of beginner-friendly in my head. I remember asking my mom if she thought that I could make this pattern. My mom has, you know, she sews. She sewed when I was younger, but it was mainly Halloween costumes, alterations, curtains, that kind of a thing. She didn't do a whole lot of garment sewing. But I saw this project, or I saw this pattern, thought it looked really cool, asked her, do you think that would be within my reach? And her response, which is very much my mom kind of response, is, well, there's instructions in it. You just follow the instructions. Why shouldn't you be able to make that? You just do it. And I think that's probably been my attitude throughout my sewing career or my sewing experience to date, that as far as I'm concerned, whatever you're making, there's going to be instructions if you're getting a pattern. You follow the instructions, you make the thing. I think these days it's even easier because you can look stuff up online, you can look at videos, blogs to get information. When I made this back in the late 90s, none of that was around. That was not going to be an option. But actually, these days, you could totally get that stuff and it would be easy. So this has some really impressive details, in my own opinion. It's got grommets, which I installed. It's got this ribbon with lace overlay going over the top of it. On the inside, I'm just going to flip it inside out. It is actually boned. So there's little sections of boning that I've got in there that I sort of enclose with some bias tape. So there's some boning there, there's some boning there to give it a bit more shape and structure. And I do remember going into the fabric shop. I'm sure it would have been Hancock Fabrics at the time because that was where I tended to go. Though I have a feeling that the purple, the main body of the fabric, I might have gotten from Vogue Fabrics in Evanston, Illinois. Anyway, Hancock Fabrics, I remember going up to a woman who worked there and asking her, first of all, what is boning? Do you sell boning? And how do I use it? And they were really nice, really helpful, very encouraging, like, yeah, you can do this, no problem, just follow the instructions on the pattern. And it came out so well, and I was incredibly proud. I think that was the first thing that I made that I felt like people wouldn't have necessarily known that I made. I mean, sure, it was a little bit out there for a prom dress, and I'm sure there were plenty of people in my class thinking that I was completely nuts for wearing that dress, but I felt awesome. I loved my prom dress, and I'm still really, really proud of that one. So the next question is from Jamie Poulos. Jamie said, what would you tell someone who's thinking about picking up garment sewing to convince them to give it a try? I do have a lot of people say to me just casually, oh, I wish I could sew, maybe I should sew. I mean, I am always extremely encouraging of anybody who wants to sew. But I think, you know, if you are really considering it and you're wondering, is this something that I want to do? Is it something that's for me? I would say that for me, obviously, I love it. You're asking the right person if you want someone to try and sell you on it. But to me, I feel like when you make your own clothes, when you can pick the exact style you want, pick the exact fabric you want, get the shape, the fit exactly how you want it, you can't do any better than that. It's having tailor-made clothes in your wardrobe all the time. It's pretty incredible. It's also just such a powerful thing to be able to make and wear your own clothes. I feel amazing when I'm wearing clothes that I've made. I always feel so much more confident and proud of myself, and I feel like I perform better at work. I feel more confident talking to people when I know that I'm wearing clothes that I made. So for me, I get a whole heck of a lot out of it. But I think honestly, the bottom line is if you want to have something that's unique, that's exactly the way you want it, unless you're really rich and can get some kind of, personal stylist and tailor to try and get everything just how you want it, this is the only way you're going to be able to achieve that. So if you think you might want to do it, try it. What's the worst that can happen? If something doesn't work out and you don't like it, not the end of the world. See if you can get maybe a used sewing machine or borrow one from somebody else if you want to just have a little bit of a play around. But yeah, I would say, why not? Just go for it. Just with any creative activity, to be honest with you. I'm a bit of a go for it kind of a person for sure. The next question comes from Mary over on Instagram. So this is an Instagram question. The previous were all from YouTube. She is CraftyGirl1964 on Instagram. She was wanting my perspective on balancing your job and crafting activities. And I think that's a good one. I mean, I think, depending on your own work life, general life balance, what you've got going on outside of your creative work, it can be really difficult to try and find the time to do your creative stuff. And for me, I know that when I have made more time for the creative stuff in my life, I felt more like myself. I felt more fulfilled personally. So it is something that I try and prioritize. I will say, first of all, I'm really lucky because my husband is really supportive of my YouTube, my sewing, doing all of my creative activities. He's my biggest cheerleader, honestly, and he always wants me to make sure that I find time to do those things as well, so that really, really helps. As far as working, I mean, I do work a full-time job. I work 7.5 hours a day, 5 days a week, and that includes sometimes I do weekends, sometimes I get called out to, on calls for home births. We'll get into my job in a second, but I go out in the middle of the night at times and I'm sleeping during the day. So my schedule can be a little bit all over the place. I think for me though, the biggest thing I would say, if you want to make time or find time for your creative work, you really kind of need to just find it. And I am definitely somebody who will just do little jobs here and there when I can. So I have mentioned this in a previous video, but in the spring, summertime, I've suddenly become a super early riser, waking up early. I am generally never been much of a morning person. So I don't know if that's just my life changing because of my age, and I'm all about that, if that's going to be a positive change in the future, because I really like getting up in the morning, but it's not something that I previously used to do. But I've been waking up typically around 5:30 in the morning, and if it's a work day, I don't usually have to get up until more like 6:30 or 6:45. So I do have a good chunk of time where I'm kind of just at a loose end and I can do what I want to do. I tend not to use my sewing machine at that time just because it is quite loud. Occasionally I will just kind of heft all of my stuff to the kitchen where it's a little bit further away from my husband and I can close the door so I don't wake him up. But usually I'll try and find some quiet activities of things that I can do just, while I'm having those couple of hours to myself. So I might do things like cutting out fabric, or I might do things like prepping pattern pieces, whether I need to be doing markings or pinning pieces together. And so that way when I do have time to sew, everything's kind of ready to go and I've got everything all pinned up and I can just shove it through the sewing machine and then that bit is done. I might do a bit of pressing as well if I need to do that for my sewing. I also might be prepping my PDF patterns. Some of those things too though I might just do while I'm hanging out with my husband. So if we're just hanging out listening to music and talking, or maybe we're watching something that's not super involved, or maybe he's playing a video game and I'm watching and hanging out, I would take an opportunity then to maybe do some knitting, or the same kinds of things I was talking about, things like I might cut out my pattern pieces while we're hanging out together, or piece together my PDFs, or pin together sections of my sewing so when I do have the opportunity I can just get on and do it. I think those are probably the ways that I am able to find more time for it, because for me it's not necessarily the work creativity balance. My work is going to happen and I'm going to be doing that no matter what, but it's probably more for me about how I balance my home time, my home life, wanting to spend time with my husband but still wanting to do my creative work. So if I can do those things together while we're hanging out, then that just makes it easier for me. I know everyone's personal circumstances are different, so you might not have that opportunity to do that, but that's what I find works. And then that kind of leads into some questions that I got. I had some similar questions from a few people. So Claire, who is sew_so right, so it's SO_SEW_WRIGHT. She asked, what is your day job? Kind of given a hint there, but I'll get back to that. And then I also had Tracy P on YouTube asking, what made you decide to go into the field of midwifery? Spoiler, Claire, I'm a midwife. Any good stories to share? And Ricky B on YouTube said, you may have mentioned in a previous video, but I was wondering what got you interested in becoming a midwife. All right, so as far as me becoming a midwife, it all started from me training to be a nurse. So I moved to the UK, got a job as a healthcare assistant, so I was just supporting in the hospital, supporting the doctors and the nurses, and decided to do my nurse training. When I was coming to the end of my nurse training, we got a little bit of extra opportunities to work around outside of nursing, just to get an idea of what other people did, things we might want to do with our career beyond our sort of traditional scope of nursing. And one of the things that I did was spend a few months with what are called health visitors. If you're not in the UK, you probably don't know what that is. If you live in the UK, you probably don't even know what that is unless you have kids. But health visitors are nurses or midwives who've done some extra training that they look after little babies up until the age of 5. So from birth until the age of 5, and they check that they're developing normally. They meet with the parents regularly, advise on things like weaning and sleeping and all that kind of stuff. So this is in the UK on the NHS, and this is free service for everybody. Obviously, wherever you are in the world, there might not be that kind of a thing. But I was with the health visitors for a while, and at some point they said that, you know, you're probably getting a little bored of seeing what we do. You've seen all the day-to-day. Maybe you should spend some time with the midwives. And at that point, I didn't really have much of a concept of what midwives were, if I'm completely honest with you. I grew up in the States. Midwifery, when I moved here in 2003, there wasn't a whole lot of midwifery around. It was very niche. There were some places where there were midwives, but they weren't always necessarily qualified in the same way that like a nurse would be. And mostly it seemed to be what we would call in the UK independent midwives. So they had one midwife who looked after them for the pregnancy, for the birth, and then a little bit after the baby was born. But in the UK, it's a pretty different story. So my idea was that midwives, either they kind of looked after women throughout their kind of pregnancy journey, or they were mainly just kind of looking after little babies. And as much as little babies are fun and they're cute, I wasn't wanting to be a pediatric nurse or a neonatal nurse. I didn't want to have my life just looking after babies because, you know, they're cute, but they're not that engaging in conversation. I like people, I like talking to people, so I felt like, probably not for me, but let's just see what the midwives do. Who knows? You never know, right? So the first thing I did with the midwives is I spent a day in their antenatal clinic. So they were looking after pregnant women for routine checkups, and I was pretty impressed, I have to say, by the midwives feeling pregnant women's tummies, being able to work out what position their baby was in, whether the baby was growing normally, all the kind of unknown pregnancy complications that can come up that I knew nothing about. These midwives were so on it. I was super impressed. I felt like they were so knowledgeable, so just warm and lovely for all the pregnant women. So I thought that was really cool, and I had a lot of respect for them after that clinic. I then went to the antenatal and the postnatal wards in the hospital. So I saw women who were in the hospital because either they were pregnant and needed a bit more observation, or they'd had the baby, hadn't left the hospital yet. I was asked to hold some newborn babies for the first time in my life and freaked out holding a brand new newborn baby. I definitely did not want that responsibility on my hands. I was pretty terrified the first time, but it was a mom who'd had like 3 or 4 kids, and she's like, "You're fine, just take the baby, you'll be okay." And it was definitely a bit more kind of nerve-wracking those days, I will say. But again, just incredible to see how much experience and knowledge these midwives seem to have, the ways they were able to tell these moms to look after themselves and the baby, to support them. It was really pretty cool. But what really set me off was the day that I spent on the labor ward. So on the labor ward, I saw babies being born by cesarean section. I saw babies being born vaginally, natural childbirth. And wow, the feeling in a room when a baby is born is like nothing else. It is incredible. The emotion, the love in that room, it is just, oh, I'm getting goosebumps even thinking about it, honestly. It is a powerful thing. And when I saw those midwives looking after those women, when I saw these babies being born, taking their first breaths, I was sold. And I went home from work that day and I said to my husband, I want to be a midwife. That's it. I'm going to be a midwife. That's what I want to do. And here I am now. So I've been a midwife now for 11 years and I haven't looked back. I did finish my nurse training, so I was a registered adult nurse. I've let my registration lapse because I'm not interested in doing nursing anymore, but I've got that background. I did my midwifery training, which for me was an additional 18 months. It's 3 years if you are not a registered nurse before. So it is a proper registration that is validated by a registering body in the UK. And midwives do look after women throughout the UK for pretty much all of their pregnancies, births, and postnatal period. The obstetricians come in if there's emergencies or if their assistance is needed, but most women just have babies with midwives. And my job specifically is working in the community. So I look after women in local GP surgeries for their pregnancy. I then also go on call for home births, and I attend births in women's homes. And then I also look after women in the postnatal period at their homes. So we visit women at home for the first 2 weeks, usually, depending. So we do a lot of sort of continuity of the women that we see throughout. But we don't have a huge number of home births, so I don't get to do them as often as I would like. Though I did do one a few days ago. I went out to a birth in the middle of the night. So it does happen for sure. But as far as stories to share, I feel like every time I was trying to think of stories and I was kind of running them by my husband, he's kind of not really the best stories for the general public. They might be funny stories or interesting stories for fellow healthcare workers, but I've got a story that I felt like you guys can enjoy that can give you a little taste of the kind of madness that can ensue when you are a midwife. So I went to a home birth, it's quite a few years ago now, and there were a little bit of concerns about the baby, that the baby might be getting a bit tired out from the labor, that we probably would be better off going into the hospital just in case. We didn't know how things were going to go, but we wanted to monitor the baby a little bit more closely. The woman agreed, we were all going to go in, so we called an ambulance to be able to take her into the hospital. And she lived on the 3rd floor. It was about like 2 a.m., something like that. And we were all going to kind of make our way downstairs and into our various cars and ambulances. I was going to be in an ambulance with her. And the little pack of us who was there, it was myself, it was another midwife, she had a doula as well who was there, her husband was there, and then there were 3 paramedics. So it was all of us getting out of the house to the ambulance. And she didn't have an elevator or lift in the apartment building she lived in, so we were going down stairs with like a little landing at each level. So we would go down some stairs, little windy stairs, and then stop at a landing, go down and stop at a landing. She's still having regular contractions all throughout this as well because, you know, she's still in strong active labor. This baby is going to be coming soon one way or another. And she'd have to take little breaks as we got to different stages on the stairs where she'd have to pause and do some deep breathing and swaying around to help herself get through that contraction. And we got to one point where we were standing all on the landing together, and she was stopping and leaning over the banister and kind of swaying back and forth, and we're all just waiting for that contraction to pass. Happened to be a particularly long contraction, and suddenly all the lights went out. Because it was one of these lights where it's like a motion sensor, and if you're not moving, it thinks no one's in the stairwell, and the lights go out completely. So then you ended up with myself, another midwife, the doula, the woman's husband, and the paramedics all just dancing around, waving our arms, trying to get these lights to go back on the landing. We are all just dying of laughter. The woman herself in the middle of contraction is dying of laughter. And of course, the lights went back on. We went into the hospital. Baby came out soon, absolutely fine. Everything was perfect. But it was definitely a pretty hilarious moment when we're all just kind of swaying and dancing, trying to get these lights to go on the stairwell. So that is my little fun story of a home birth that I had quite a few years ago. But yeah, always an interesting experience at my work one way or another. No 2 days are the same, for sure. And then I also had a question, another one from Ricky. Well, Ricky B is Ricky Sews over on Instagram, and she snuck another question in there. So Ricky was asking, what is your favorite thing to sew? And what is your favorite and least favorite sewing task? So as far as my favorite thing to sew, I think that one's pretty easy for me. My favorite thing to sew is definitely dresses. Dresses are the thing that I have made the most of, for sure, and they're the thing that I probably almost exclusively made for a good chunk of my early sewing period. I really like to wear dresses. I like dresses, they're a lot of fun. There's a lot of variety with dresses as well, so you can make some quite different styles of dresses, but they all feel unique, and depending on the fabric you choose, they can be really different. I think I'd probably go woven dresses as well in particular that I really enjoy. I do like mostly a kind of fit and flare shape. I feel like that works well on my figure. So dresses are definitely my favorite thing to sew. As far as my favorite and least favorite sewing task, my favorite sewing task I think is probably a lot of people's least favorite sewing task, and that is gathering. I really enjoy gathering. And I don't really know why that is. I think it's because it's one of these activities where you have to just slow down. You can't really rush gathering. You have to, you know, I'm very much of the kind of traditional gathering style where I'll sew 2 rows of basting stitches, and then I will use those to kind of cinch everything up to pin it in place so that I can gather it evenly across the skirt usually to the bodice, you know, whatever I'm joining together, 2 rows of a tiers of a skirt or whatever it might be. And I like the thing that I have to just sit and relax and take my time and do that. This is another one of these activities where I will definitely sit and do while I'm hanging out with my husband when we're, you know, watching a movie or, you know, talking or whatever it is. Because you can do that and still talk to other people. You're not at a noisy sewing machine. Sitting at a noisy sewing machine is very sort of on your own, you know, it's a singular activity, but I can do gathering while I'm hanging out. So I just enjoy the sitting and, you know, trying to get everything nice and even. It's not like I look for perfect gathers, but I just feel like it's a very meditative activity for sewing. My least favorite activity is I probably got to be hemming. I get really impatient when I'm coming to the end of finishing a project, and hemming is usually the final thing that you need to do. And once I've gotten to the point where I need to hem, I'm just so ready to be finished with this garment because I want to wear it, because I'm excited. I've almost finished this thing. And I just get so irritated that I have to sit and do the hemming. And I have put things to one side and like started another project because I cannot be bothered to do the hemming, which is so ridiculous because the whole point is it's because I want to wear it. So what is my brain thinking it's going to achieve by making something else and still not finishing that final task? But I will say that I've been trying a little bit of a trial of doing some hand hemming. When I first learned to sew, my first thing I probably ever sewed was my mom taught me to hem my skirts for my school uniform because I wanted to hem them and make them a bit shorter, because when you first got them they were like nearly down to your ankles, but everyone wore them just above the knee. So my mom was saying, oh well, if you want to hem them, because she used to hem them before us, but she's like, well, if you want to do it, I'll show you how to do the hemming. And she always did it by hand. And so I know how to hem by hand, and that was kind of my intro into sewing. And so I thought that would be a good thing to try and do when I'm hemming things now, to bring it more towards like the gathering thing that I enjoy, where it's slower, it's more relaxed, meditative, rather than just trying to push it through on the sewing machine, try to keep it nice and neat. I feel like it's easier to get a neater hem when you do it by hand, and you can make the hem nearly invisible on the outside, so it's a really nice, neat finish. So I did do that on a recent skirt that I made, the Patty Pocket skirt that I made in Ankara fabric, and I have to say I enjoyed the process a lot more, and also I was able to sit and hand sew that hem whilst hanging out with my family. So it's definitely something that I'm going to try and do to make that task more enjoyable for myself. I'm not saying that I'm never going to hem by machine again. It totally depends on the project and what suits the project, but I'm hoping that makes me enjoy the hemming more. But yeah, hemming, if someone else wants to hem my garments, I'm all about that. Please take my garments. Give me something hemmed. I will love you. I'll do all your gathering. I think that's a fair trade. So I think I'm gonna stop there. I think like this is probably a long enough video at the moment, but I am gonna do more questions and answers upcoming. So keep your peepers peeled if you want to see more questions and answers, and I will see you all again before long. If you do want to see more of my videos, as you know, you can always hit that subscribe button, leave me a comment if you've got any thoughts or feelings on my questions or my answers. And thanks again all of you for joining in and for asking me these questions. Bye!